Thank you, Michael, for what you've done. He's been a pioneer in addressing this issue and bringing some new ideas, sorely needed. Very, very proud of all the things you've done. I've been able to follow him around a little bit at Cannes. Sometimes I broke into some of his sessions. I learned a lot, and we hope that you'll continue your pioneering effort. I'm truly happy to be here, but actually at my age, I'm truly happy to be anywhere. But I am pleased to offer some thoughts on the subject of mentoring and championing women in our industry. As Chairman Emeritus of DDB, supposed to be a slide up there that says, there we go. Thank you, Francis. I come from an agency with a history of championing women. Bill Bernbach, the legendary founder of DDB, named Phyllis Robinson. There she is. Phyllis Robinson, his first copy chief back in 1949. And Phyllis and her team, which included other female superstars, including Judy Protus, Paula Green, created some of the agency's most amazing pattern-breaking work. This amazing Orbax campaign for an unfashionable department store, giving it a personality for the first time. The famous Levy posters. What am I doing wrong, Francis?
It may not be reaching you. It may not be reaching them.
Okay, so
Just give me a nod and I'll hit the button.
oh, this is going to be very interesting because there are lots of nods in here. Okay. All right. So the next one, the Levy posters for Levy Bread, celebrating diversity. And now the next one, the 40-year campaign for Avis. We're only number 2, written by Paula Green. Also, Rita Selden, another woman in that department, came up with the headline for one of the world's most famous ads in history, Lemon. So now at DDB, we're embarked on an initiative called the Phyllis Project, a 2-year program honoring the late Phyllis Robinson that promotes our next generation of female creative leaders and educates current leaders on mentoring and championing our most promising young women to make sure they're being offered the opportunities they deserve. There are 12 women in the project at the moment. They are from DDB offices in Brazil, Canada, Germany, India, New Zealand, South Africa, Spain, and the US. And these photos show some of them at Cannes last year, where they were engaged in a range of activities, including media training and hanging out with old guys. In addition, our dynamic North American CEO, Wendy Clark, initiated a Talent Has No Gender program throughout the 17 offices under her cognizance. In my own case, I married the best account executive I ever worked with. She was the agency's youngest senior vice president at age 27. And while I was surely championing her talents and abilities, I also learned a lot from her, and I still am. She retired from the business years ago. Next week, Rosalie and I will celebrate our 42nd wedding anniversary. And I overheard her telling a friend not long ago that in all those years, she has never even once considered divorce. Murder, yes, but never divorce. When I was asked to share a few perspectives on the subject of mentoring, I happily agreed when I remembered that a recent Johns Hopkins study says that mentoring can actually delay the decline of brain function. Sounds good to me. Even though I still feel young, I have to be alert to those 3 well-known signs of aging. The first, of course, is memory loss. The second, it'll come to me. Meanwhile, to help me with this assignment, I reached out to some younger professionals, all women I have championed in one way or another, and who I stay in touch with even as their careers are on the rise. Nadia Maratla is a design director at Douglas Elliman, the big real estate firm. One of the young people, professionals I engaged. I like the way she described what I've called unintentional mentoring. Nadia said, mentors are atmospheric. You learn to absorb, to borrow their useful, cultivated, abstract qualities, such as dignity, character, integrity, and humility. Another member of my outreach is Janet Guillet, Creative Director at DDB New York. When I asked about her mentors, she said, I really didn't have one, but she was fortunate to absorb lessons from the strong creative women who were there at the start. What lessons did Janet learn from these unintentional mentors? A few. Take a seat at the table and believe you deserve to be there. Speak up, says Janet. She says she often struggles to hear what women are saying in a meeting. Be confident, says Janet. Never follow your opinions with words like, well, I don't know, maybe it's just me. Always give your clients an honest opinion, even if you know it's not what they want to hear. They don't have to agree, but you will build up equity points. Grab every opportunity to build those around you. The positive effect will bounce back to you. And then, of course, keep a sense of humor, especially in the most stressful times. What about intentional mentors? I actually reached out to 12 contemporary professionals I've watched as they've advanced their careers. I'll quickly introduce them in alphabetical order. Gabby Armand is Vice President of Audience Development at Jazz at Lincoln Center. Mary Backrich, Strategy Director at Johannes Leonardo. Emily Bailey, Director, Internal Communications for Liberty Mutual Insurance. Lauren Bond is a Middle East reporter for Ground Truth. Christy Guerra, Communications Director at DDB North America. Janet Guillet, Creative Director at DDB New York. Carrie Guittard, a Principal at Global Engagement Partners. Sarah Haberman, the Executive Director of The Moth. Diane Jackson, Head of Production, DDB Chicago. Nadia Marlatla, Senior Vice President, Design and Development, Douglas Elliman. And Dawn Fitch-Mitchell, Director of Diversity, DDB Worldwide. Kristen Chard-Rabsat, Senior Account Executive, Telecom Industry at Google. I asked these women to share their thoughts and experience on the subject of mentoring. I hope you find them helpful. I did. First of all, it seems clear that a good mentorship begins with a good relationship. Many of these women spoke of it as an organic relationship. Dawn says the most helpful mentoring relationships were informal career and life mentoring. Carrie says, my amazing mentors came into my life at the most unexpected moments, and though they were never called mentors, nor was there a formalized relationship, the impact was profound. Carrie goes on to say, I think because the relationships grew organically, they were more authentic and more real. Mary says the best mentoring happens naturally without a formal plan or a set schedule. She points out that mentorship is a two-way street, and you'll limit the potential if you think of it only in conventional terms. Older manager mentoring a younger employee. In fact, Diane says it probably doesn't work to mentor a direct report. Mary also cautions, don't force yourself on someone just because you want to mentor them. And if someone asks you to mentor them and it doesn't seem like a good fit, find a gentle way to decline. At the same time, Dawn makes an important point about connecting with a mentor. She says, some of us are afraid to ask for a mentor. This can be especially true, she says, for women of color. And she advises, look for qualities that inspire you, and don't be afraid of rejection. Just ask. All this seems in line with a recent Harvard webinar on the subject, which urged participants to put the relationship before the mentorship. All too often, said the experts, mentorship can involve just sort of a check-the-box procedure instead of something authentic and relationship-based. One study showed that unless mentees have a basic relationship with their mentors, there is no discernible difference between mentees and those not mentored. The emphasis on relationship rings true for me. Just out of high school, I was working as an unpaid apprentice in a commercial advertising art studio. A seasoned pro named Keith Freeman not only took me under his wing to teach me how to spec type and lay out a page. He took me into his home, shared his love of jazz, and from time to time even let me sit in on drums in his swinging little jazz trio. Mentorship is a relationship. A good mentor listens. Not surprisingly, the women I reached out to all agreed on the importance of listening. Dawn says, listening is key. If you're not listening for key words, tone, and hearing all that your mentee is sharing, it's very possible to give incorrect advice or steer someone in the wrong direction. Mary agrees. She said, listening means not just hearing the words, but how they're said, what's left unsaid. Nadia points out that mentors are critical in evaluating courses of action, and she's found that simply speaking to mentors about various options available is very helpful, providing the mentor is listening. Kristen adds, the mentorship is often about someone who listens and can customize their point of view based on the mentee's needs. She says that providing anecdotes that are completely irrelevant to a mentee's needs is the mark of a poor mentor. Janet mentioned that a mentor needs to ask a lot of questions. Like, does the mentee want to be CCO or CEO, or just to be taken seriously and respected? She notes that often women don't actually know what they want to be. Some of these women mentioned the importance of reflective listening, the mentor playing back what he or she believes the mentee has said. Mary says, a mentor once helped me see the other side of a difficult situation with a former colleague. The relationship between this colleague and me had frayed and was affecting our work. I wanted to intervene, she said, and clear the air. And when I described my plan to my mentor, she listened carefully and then played it back to me from the perspective of the other person. It made me realize that my approach could have been perceived as combative rather than constructive. My mentor then worked with me to come up with an alternative plan, how to hit the reset button, and it worked well to smooth things over. Sarah says her best mentors first listened to her describe a problem, then rather than telling her what to do, provided a framework for thinking about the solution. She says telling a mentee what to do is robbing them of their ability to grow. Carrie said the mentor should focus on active listening without prejudgment or without interruption. Good mentors engage. Gabby says a good mentor must be generous with their time, generous with their knowledge, and generous with their willingness to engage. Of the three, says Gabby, willingness to engage is perhaps the most important. She goes on to say, I've had great mentors who often demonstrated what they wanted me to learn by exposing me to their own work challenges and opportunities. Being able to actually sit through meetings and be an observer in important situations, says Gabby, allowed me to see different problem-solving techniques in real time. Diane reminds us of what Confucius said 450 BC. Tell me and I will forget. Show me and I may remember. Involve me and I will understand. She goes on to say that mentoring has engaged me, has made the biggest impact on choices I've made in my career. Over the past few years, I myself have engaged Mary to help me in a number of branding projects for Jazz at Lincoln Center and Sesame Street, among others. In every case, through this kind of engagement, we learn from each other. I'm sure I learned more than she did, but we learned from each other. Mentees can also be engaged by stories. A good mentor needs to be a good storyteller, says Nadia, sharing their experience through what she describes as the narrative case study. Nadia believes these can be invaluable to those trying to find their way. But mentors should include stories of failure, says Diane. Kristen agrees and said a good mentor shares his or her personal experiences, failures and successes, in order to guide the mentee. Lauren says an important part of mentorship that I feel is never discussed is failure. I wish my mentors shared their failures with me. I wish they showed me their vulnerability instead of only their strengths. Carrie says one of her mentors often pulled her aside to say, this is what I did, don't make that mistake. And Emily asked me not long ago if I ever talk about how I really messed up. I said, how much time do you have? Wow, where would we start? A good point. Good mentors encourage their mentees. Anthony Jan is CEO of a venture capital firm featured on a Harvard webinar recently. On the subject of mentoring, he believes in encouragement and says, shout loudly with your optimism and keep quiet with your cynicism. Your mentee might come to you, he says, with some off-the-wall ideas that seem unrealistic or too ambitious. And you might be tempted to help them think more realistically. But mentors need to be givers of energy, not takers of it. Consider why an idea might work before you consider why it might not. In my own case, I borrowed the 5-minute rule from a company in Silicon Valley. The rule states that for the first 5 minutes after an idea is expressed, only positive comments are allowed. These women all spoke of the importance of encouragement. Dawn says, without my mentor's guidance, I would never imagine I could progress in corporate America. He coached me to truly believe in my talents and to take on new projects without fear. Emily says, my mentor sees me as bigger than myself. She says, 10 years ago, I couldn't believe I would be a successful professional, but having kind and consistent encouragement has allowed me to start growing into that bigger self. Sarah says both of her mentors thought she was intelligent enough to think for herself and find the answers. She says that knowing someone has confidence in you is incredibly motivating. And along with encouragement, Christy and Mary both say, don't be afraid to give some tough love. Mary adds, if the mentee just wants praise, it might be better for them just to call their mother. Of course, you should be supportive and encourage, but call out if there's behavior or mindset that needs to be course corrected. Not only tough love, but tough tasks. Gabby says, I've had mentors who've thrown me into the deep end of situations to see how I would cope and to showcase what I've learned. Having a mentor who pushes you to be courageous and take a risk with a creative idea, says Gabby, is something you'll always remember. Janet, who originally said she had no mentors, later admitted to having at least one. And this mentor kept suggesting her for panels and public appearances, to which Janet replied, I hate that stuff. I'm no good at that stuff. And he said, really, you don't seem like that. Just do it. It'll be fun. So Janet did it. It was fun, and she's all the better for that experience. Diane's mentor asked her to teach seminars to her peers on subjects that were not her strength. And the preparation and pressure before standing before a group, says Diane, definitely upped her game. She reminds us that a calm sea does not make a skilled sailor, and urges mentor not to be afraid to challenge people and allow them the freedom to fail. Gabby tells the story of one mentor who came to New York from California to work on a specific project. He invited her to sit in on this important meeting and even voice her opinion about this project he was spearheading. And then on his last day, he invited Gabby to accompany him to an important pitch. It was a pitch meeting at PepsiCo in their big headquarters, and he was meeting with top PepsiCo executives to pitch a big summer music tour. It was going to be his big New York victory before returning to his LA office. As the discussion turned to financials, for some reason, Gabby felt compelled to offer information she thought would be helpful. And before she knew it, she had spilled the beans. She had divulged the actual cost of one of the key components of the deal. And this was, of course, not the number her mentor was pitching. Her mentor shot her a look that Gabby said she'll never forget. Her reveal of the actual costs had sunk the deal. Gabby says on the way back to Manhattan, her mentor looked at her and said, don't worry, everyone gets one stupid moment where they speak before they think, and this was yours. Remember it, but don't let it hold you back. Just be smarter. Gabby says she'll never forget that, and she'll never forget him. And since then, she always takes a minute to think before she speaks. Good mentors open doors. Kristen says a good mentor often helps construct connect a mentee with valuable resources and networks. Mary agrees and says, don't worry if you can't help with everything, because you won't be able to. It's better to say, this is beyond my realm of expertise, than it is to bluff your way through something. Consider tapping into your network of connections if you know someone who can help in the matter. I like this idea of connecting a mentee with others, opening doors to new perspectives. In fact, Mary says, think about having more than one mentor, more like a personal board of directors. I like that. Be there. In different ways, the women stress the need for a mentor to be accessible, available, and approachable. Kristen says, in order to be a good mentor, one has to be available and accessible to the mentee. The mentee has to feel as though this person is committed to their mental, physical, psychological, career growth. And being available is part of that responsibility. Dawn said the least helpful type of mentoring was a life mentor who was overextended and unavailable. A mentor wanted to be a positive resource for me, but simply didn't have the time to actively listen or get to know my needs. Therefore, our conversations, she said, left me unfulfilled. And Diane says, after giving a mentee a tough task or a challenge, you need to allow yourself to be a safe harbor so that there's an openness to be able to, for the mentee to ask any question. She says, Emily adds that a good mentor is approachable. She says a relationship with a towering industry figure isn't fruitful if you're too intimidated to ask for advice. Sarah says being a mentor is long-term. An aspiring mentee needs to know if you'll be there through thick and thin. She says, my first mentor is a well-known French publisher and a minor political figure who took me under her wing during my 5-year tenure at a French publishing house. She says, as a recent graduate and a Wisconsin girl who knew only some rudimentary French, her advice was invaluable to me. In a sense, she was my Professor Higgins, says, guiding me through a foreign professional and cultural landscape. She is still my mentor, and I see her regularly. Christy tells a story about the woman who mentored her in her first job in advertising in Richmond, Virginia. Christy didn't know how lucky she was until she moved to New York, a career move that her mentor supported. But it turned out her new boss, this was not at DDB, was a Devil Wears Prada type who made Christy's life miserable. She called her mentor from the new agency's bathroom and talked her through the situation. Her mentor's advice, if you can, wait and see if people figure this bad person out. But if it takes too long for you, then leave. Run for the door. You're doing the right thing, and you need to stand up for what you believe in. As it turned out, the Devil Wears Prada lady was asked to leave the agency, and guess who was promoted into her new role? Christy. The point is, her mentor was there for her, and Christy says she still calls this mentor for support and guidance. Christy says, I'll send a quick email and say, hey, it's me, and I need you if you have time. And she's always there, just as she was 14 years ago. Good mentors follow up. Christy says, stay in touch with your mentees even when they succeed, and it feels like they don't need you as much, because they do. And Mary suggests, send emails, share proactively, don't wait for them to come to you. Email an inspiring article or video that relates to the subject of your last conversation. Don't wait for an appointment or face-to-face chat. An ongoing dialogue makes the learning and inspiration much more fluid and free-flowing. In short, inspire. Kristen says, mentorship is part information and part inspiration. Good mentors have the abilities to energize mentees into following passions and envisioning opportunities they might not have thought achievable. Inspire them. There are many ways to inspire, as I've often told my own mentees. Along with being inspired by a mentor, you can even take inspiration from those who intend to do the opposite. Someone who, instead of being encouraging, intends to discourage you. I'll close with a story of one who did just that for me. We okay? Wifty Sprunger was a big deal in the small farming town where I grew up in Indiana. Wifty was the owner, editor, and publisher of the town's newspaper. It was called Indiana's only tri-weekly. We joked that he tried every week to get one out. Actually, we suggested he change the name to Sluggish Artery because of its poor circulation, but he did not accept that. But he was a big deal. And I was a mere delivery boy, peddling Wifty's paper through the town, wind, sleet, or snow, on my bicycle 3 times a week. But Wifty wanted a new letterhead designed for his little publishing company. And he had heard that I had aspirations to be an advertising artist. In fact, I had just won a student art competition that garnered a few lines of recognition on the front page of Wifty's paper. So he asked me to submit some sketches, which I did. There were 3 that he liked, and he asked me to work them up. For hours I labored, hand lettering the type, fussing with graphic elements and relationships. When finally I felt satisfied, I took them into Wifty's imposing office and laid them out on Wifty's nifty desk. He liked them all, but he loved one. And within weeks, his publishing company had a new corporate identity program. What a rush. I had sold my first book, my first work, to a happy and satisfied client. So I sent him a bill for $15. He was outraged. He went ballistic. Who do you think you are? I give you an opportunity to get your work printed, produced, a real job, and you have the nerve to charge me for it? What you did isn't worth $15. In no uncertain terms, Wifty let me know that in his expert opinion, I would never succeed in advertising. Well, I never forgot Wifty, and I never will. He's long since passed on, but he may be why I've always felt so passionately about getting paid fairly for our work. More than that, Wifty came to symbolize every enemy who ever doubted we could do what we dreamed of doing. The specter of Wifty never failed to evoke passion and, yes, anger against the cynics and naysayers who said it couldn't be done. Whether that it was the creation of an advertising campaign or the creation of a company. Watch this, Wifty. Take that, Wifty. Think DDB Worldwide might be worth $15, Wifty? What about Omnicom with revenues of $15 billion last year? So thanks, Wifty. Thanks for inspiring me. Without your rejection of my bill, I probably wouldn't be here today. But you still owe me $15. Thank you very much.